waters once see, all lifted hearts are free. Many windows, one light, many waters, one sea, all lifted hearts are free.
In the Talmud of the Jewish tradition, the sage Hillel said, "What is hateful to you, do not do to others." This is the whole of the law. All the rest is commentary.
In the Hindu legend of the Mahabharata, the divine Krishna declares, "This is the sum of duty. Do nothing unto others which would cause you pain if done to you."
It is written, it is taught, may it be so.
In the Gospel of Matthew and the Christian scriptures, the Messiah Jesus says, "Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do so to them."
In the Buddhist text of the Udana Varga, the student is urged, "Hurt not others in ways that you yourself find hurtful."
It is written, it is taught, may it be so.
Many windows, one light, many waters, one sea, all lifted hearts are free.
In the Muslim hadith of An-Nawawi, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, teaches, "No one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself."
Baha'u'llah, prophet and founder of the Baha'i faith, wrote, "And if thine eyes be turned towards justice, choose thou for thy neighbor that which thou choosest for thyself."
It is written, it is taught, may it be so.
Welcome to this Baja 4 collaborative worship service. My name is Nina Tali and I'm a member of UUCT. Whenever you're joining us, wherever you are worshiping from, you are welcome to bring your whole self here now. We are the Baja 4, representing Unitarian Universalists across southeastern Arizona. As Unitarian Universalists, we love beyond belief and find inspiration from a wide array of spiritual, religious, and secular sources. We come together as Baja 4 because we know we are stronger together. We represent Borderland Unitarian Universalists in Amado, Sky Island Unitarian Universalist Church in Sierra Vista, Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Northwest Tucson, and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson on the east side of Tucson. We take inspiration from the landscape around us. We find in our desert stories of resilience and change, beauty and interconnection, death and life. We acknowledge that this land that was stolen from the Chiricahua, Apache, Pascua, Yaqui, Udam, Opata, people who are the indigenous ancestors of this land, are neighbors today. Please take a breath with me to express your gratitude for all the indigenous people who have stewarded this land for thousands of years and continue to do so today. Breathe in, breathe out.
Today's service is the first of 4 this month, prepared by UUCT Worship Associates, as our ministers enjoy a well-deserved break. Our July theme is Embracing Diversity. I am UUCT Worship Associate Howard Tolley, who volunteered to lead the Independence Day service based on my years teaching political science and advocacy for racial justice. For opening words, I'll read a selection from Amanda Hill's poem, The Hill We Climb. That was a highlight at President Biden's inaugural in January, urging us to put aside our differences. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? And yet, the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow, we do it. Somehow, we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. So we lift our gazes to what stands between us, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so that we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. The words for our chalice lighting this morning were written by Reverend Eric Walker Wickstrom under the title, So That We Might Together Shine. When we light our chalice, everyone focuses on the flame, yet it is the paraffin of the candle, the cotton of the wick, the potassium chlorate and sulfur of the match, and the oxygen in the air around us that makes that flame possible. As leaders, we are not called to be a lone beacon on a hill. Rather, we are meant to work together so that we might together shine. The prelude and postlude for this service, All Lifted Hearts, celebrates the religious diversity that embraces a universal golden rule. The World House Choir of Yellow Springs, Ohio, led by artistic director Catherine Roma, made that inspiring recording, as well as the recording of our first hymn this morning, We Shall Not Be Moved. Pictures of demonstrations are displayed in celebration of civil rights leader Bayard Rustin, the man behind the dream, to accompany that choral recording.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved. No, no. We shall not be moved.
Hi, I'm Jamila with the UU Church of Tucson, and I've been thinking a lot lately about this meme that's been going around that says, activism is a multi-lane highway. We're not all driving in the same lane, but you've got to keep your foot on the gas. I'm thinking about that today as we talk about the second principle. It reads, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And when I think about all the areas that require justice, equity, and compassion in the world these days, I feel, well, to be honest, discouraged. How can I do it all? Well, to be honest, I can't, and neither can you. But we can ask, what role can I play? One person who knew well what role she wanted to play was a white woman named Juliet Hampton Morgan. She was born in 1914, is the only child of Frank and Lila Morgan in Montgomery, Alabama. Her white skin and her family pedigree, they were very wealthy and in Alabama for a very long time, afforded her entrance into shops and restaurants and galleries and concert halls, things not available to people who are not of her stature. When she grew up, she was a public school teacher and a librarian for the Montgomery County Library. And that was an acceptable position for a white woman in society to hold in the 1930s. However, some of Juliet's activities outside of work were not as acceptable. For example, she belonged to an interracial prayer group. The group met only in black churches because the white churches wouldn't allow them to meet. Many of Juliet's friends and family members did not understand her desire to belong to this group. One seemingly insignificant thing separated her even further from her friends who lived lives of privilege. She had severe anxiety attacks. These attacks prevented her from learning to drive. So she rode the city buses everywhere that she needed to get. And on those city buses, she saw people of all races and all classes. She writes about one time when she saw a white bus driver, quote, use the tone and manner of mule drivers in their treatment of Negro passengers. And while we don't use the word Negro anymore, we clearly understand how awfully that bus driver treated the passengers of color. She watched the bus drivers threaten and humiliate black men and women who paid the same fare that she paid without harassment. One morning, Juliet tells the story of how she rode the bus and she watched a black woman pay her fare and then leave the front door of the bus to go to the back door of the bus, as she was expected to do, in order to ride in the back of the bus. As soon as the woman stepped off, the white bus driver pulled away, leaving the woman behind, even though she'd already paid her fare. Juliet got angry, and instead of just sitting there, she jumped up and she pulled the emergency cord and stopped the bus. She demanded that that bus driver go back and pick up that woman. No one on the bus could believe what they had seen. That was not something that people did. Bus drivers were allowed to get away with the mistreatment of black passengers. In the days that followed, Juliet pulled the cord every time she saw a black passenger be left behind or mistreated, effectively stopping everybody's bus route. And of course, the bus drivers were angry, city workers were angry. News spread quickly, and the drivers began to antagonize Juliet. Throughout the rest of her life, she received hate mail and death threats, and even had a cross burned on her lawn. In 1939, which was 16 years before the 1955 famous Montgomery bus boycott, Juliet began and continued her campaign to denounce the horrible injustices she witnessed on the city buses. Her last letter was published in 1957 in the Tuscaloosa News, where she thanked the newspaper editor for his opposition to a council of local white men that he believed was contributing to continued racial violence. She wrote, I had begun to wonder if there were any men in the state, any white men, with any sane evaluation of our situation here in the middle of the 20th century, with any goodwill, and most especially with any moral courage to express it. Why is Juliet's story important? Because the stories of women and the stories of anti-racist white people cannot be left out of the teachings of the civil rights movement. The American civil rights movement was and continues to be a movement of the people, and we are the people. And Juliet Hampton Morgan was an ally. She was someone who supported and stood up for the rights and dignities of others, even when it wasn't safe for her to do so. Her story provides a powerful roadmap for us today. So the question is, what's your lane? What justice, equity, and compassion can you bring into this world? Where can you lend your voice as an ally? Where are you a leader? Everything, big and little, help us to create the beloved community that we all dream of.
Now for a serious reading from one of our nation's greatest orators, Frederick Douglass, a fugitive slave who was reportedly the most photographed individual of the 19th century, as he sought to display a dignified image that offset the humiliating depictions of men of color disseminated by white supremacists. Invited to address a northern white audience celebrating Independence Day in 1852, Douglass asked, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men, too, great enough to give frame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to rise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? Am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offering to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so solid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak and the lame man leap as an art. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice. I must mourn. At the annual meeting of Unitarian Universalist Justice Ohio last November, Reverend Connie Simon delivered a powerful message promoting diversity 2 weeks after Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election. Reverend Connie Simon began serving as minister at First Unitarian Church, Cincinnati, in 2018, the same year Reverend Bethany arrived at UUCT. After serving as a corporate lawyer and director of a Philadelphia nonprofit, Reverend Connie was making a career change. She teaches UU history at the Midwest Leadership School, and she edits the Dictionary of UU Biography. Invited by UJO to address issues of racial justice, Reverend Connie's post-election message, titled, "What Do We Do Now?" remains timely and relevant 6 months into the Biden administration, when our diverse nation remains bitterly polarized by political, racial, gender, and pandemic differences.
Thank you so much for having me here this morning. And I really like that analogy of the house being on fire. And I think you may hear some of those notes in what I'm about to say, because I want to talk about kind of where we are right now. Maybe the election's over, I don't know. But yeah, a couple of weeks ago, this thing happened. On November 7th, we decided that Election Day had finally ended, kind of. Enough votes had been counted to declare former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris victorious in the states of Nevada and Pennsylvania, giving them the electoral votes needed to become the president-elect and vice president-elect of the United States. And a lot of people were excited. They filled the streets and cities and towns across America. They sang and they danced and they marched, and they were just celebrating. Now, some were celebrating an end to the division of discord that has plagued us for the last 4 years, or at least they tell themselves it's only been the last 4 years. Some celebrated a change in policies, others an end to the disregard of the rule of law as they saw it. Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank was just one of many people who quoted President Gerald Ford's post-Watergate line that our long national nightmare is over. He wrote that Donald Trump has lost the presidency. Americans have sent packing the man who made the lives of so many a hell for the last 4 years, with constant chaos, unbridled vitriol, and attacks on the foundations of democracy. There may be difficulty in the days ahead because of gratuitous court challenges and baseless claims of fraud, he said. The rage Trump has induced in supporters and opponents alike will take time to dissipate. But for a moment, let us rejoice. Our democracy has survived. Now, there were also people celebrating Kamala Harris specifically, the first woman, first African-American woman, and first person of South Asian descent to be vice president of the United States. And I'm happy too. I'm glad to see that our democracy has survived. Glad to see the power of the people to vote for their elected leaders. I'm glad to see so many different people of different identities and ethnicities and backgrounds coming together to elect our leaders. The right to vote is precious. People have fought and died for it. You know, as of this morning, 79,784,165 people voted for Joe Biden for president. The system worked. And for that, I am happy. Now, I'm also proud of Kamala Harris. She's so smart and so talented. She's younger than I am and is about to be the Vice President of the United States, a Black woman. A friend texted me a picture of all the past vice presidents of the US, kind of in a block of small squares of black and white photos, like a yearbook. All these white men, and then this full-bodied color shot of Kamala Harris leaning against the block of pictures. I am so proud of her. And there's another group of folks who are happy, the ones who are happy because we won and they lost. I get it. I truly get it. The fervor, the passion, the commitment to a particular political party or a cause. And over a period of time, I suppose it can create a sense of us versus them. But I gotta tell you, it troubles my mind and it doesn't sit well with my soul at all. I consider Donald Trump to be a crude, vulgar narcissist who has had some economic and professional success in life and whose views on many issues, including race, class, the economy, climate change, and the coronavirus, are wildly inconsistent with mine. And 73,763,979 people voted for him. They can't all be racist, xenophobic, transphobic, horrible people, can they? I don't think so. Those 79 million people who voted for Biden, are they all anti-racist, inclusive, welcoming, and wonderful people? I don't think so. Not all Biden voters are good people, and not all Trump voters are horrible people. They were just as passionate, just as committed to their candidate as Biden supporters were to theirs. Just because someone voted for Donald Trump doesn't make them evil. Look, racism, homophobia, transphobia, etc., are never okay. But isn't it okay to have different views on policy? Different approaches to solving problems? They are not bad people any more than we are good. They are not wrong any more than we are right. That's the Universalist in me talking. Now, I can hear some of you screaming at me right now through Zoom, Reverend Connie, Donald Trump is horrible. He won't concede the elections. Republicans are enabling him. He does terrible things. You just don't understand. Trust me, I get it. I'm not completely naive. But I'll tell you this, my faith tells me that the first thing we've got to do is calm down. In what I guess can be called his victory speech, Joe Biden said, "For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple of times myself. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as enemies." I agree. We need to turn down the level of vitriol in our political discourse and bring back civility. All of us. It wasn't helping anything. It was only making things worse, causing people to become even more entrenched in their positions. That was fanning the flames. We need a return to decency, or at least a return to the appearance of decency and civility in government and politics. It's time to unclench our fists. This was an historic election, but so was the election of Barack Obama in 2008. And still, the presidency of Donald Trump happened. Electing Biden and Harris doesn't automatically solve all our problems. There are some very angry people out there who found something appealing in the rhetoric of the current president. They're often described as rabid in their support. But have we stopped to ask, what is the source of their anger? I think it's really not anger at all. It's fear. It's fear of losing their livelihood, their ability to pay their rent or mortgage, to buy food, to pay for health care. And they're not the only ones who are afraid. Many of us are afraid. That's why we've got to get to work on economic justice. According to the Center for Community Solutions, Cleveland was the poorest large city in the United States. Almost 31% of its residents were living in poverty in 2019. In Cincinnati, where I am, the number was 23.1%. All over this state, people are struggling economically, and it's only been made worse by the pandemic. It's time for us to work harder than ever for fundamental change in our economic system to ensure that everyone earns a living wage and has access to affordable health care, adequate housing, and healthy food. We have to keep pushing on voter education, registration, and engagement. Turn on the news. We're watching in real time systemic efforts to undermine the integrity of our elections and to suppress votes, especially those of poor Black and brown voters. This election ripped the lid off the cauldron of systemic racism simmering in the groundwater of this country. It's boiled over into all areas of our society, affecting every one of us. Fear of Black and brown bodies is rampant in this country as the dominant culture, white folks, fear they're losing their identity and their power. The problem with this is that it's rooted in a paradigm of scarcity, that there's not enough money, enough influence, enough power to go around. Remember the rallying cry in opposition to the racial justice protests this summer? They want to take away our neighborhoods, our way of life. They want to bring violence to our cities. They are dangerous, and their revolution must be quashed at all costs. The truth is that we, Black and brown people, are tired and weary and frustrated and, yes, angry. That's why we took to the streets. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we say we are committed to the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We say we are committed to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Well, now's the time for us to prove it. Unitarian Universalists must continue to work to dismantle white supremacy culture in this country. We must continue to examine our existing systems and identify the places where whiteness and white culture are privileged. We must continue to do the hard work of personal reflection and introspection that will allow us to see where we are vulnerable to exploitation by regimes such as the current administration, that want to exploit people's fears and cause them to turn against their neighbors. We must continue to educate ourselves in anti-racism and take what we learn to heart by living into our UU theology, our principles, and our core values. We need to empower the voices of those who have been marginalized for too long. Black and brown people, Indigenous people, poor people, disabled people, and LGBTQ folks. It's time to center their experiences. I'm not saying that the experiences of other folks aren't important. I'm saying that right now we must be committed to the liberation of those who have been marginalized. And that means centering their experiences, hearing their voices, and listening to their pain, because their pain is our pain. If we are all truly interdependent beings in an interconnected web of life, that must also mean that none of us are free until all of us are free. We must help our siblings become free. So when John asked me to speak here today, I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And he said that he'd heard my thing was racism, and that would be great for today. And while I hope I haven't disappointed him by talking about things besides race, it's true that racism is one of my things. Look at me. Because of the color of my skin, I bring the issue of racism with me wherever I go. My first career was as a tax lawyer. For years, I was one of only a handful of women and the only Black woman doing corporate tax litigation in Boston. In my second career, I did finance and regulatory work for a large telecommunications company. My job involved meeting with mayors in Eastern Arkansas, North Mississippi, and West Tennessee cities and towns. Believe me, I know racism. I've seen it. And now I move in UU spaces where there tend not to be many people who look like me. Did you know that there are fewer than 10 Black women ministers leading UU churches in our entire denomination? Actually, I think the number's only like 7 or 8. I can count them by name. So I get it. Wherever I go, people want me to talk about racism. But right now, I'm not sure that's the biggest flame. It's a big one, but I'm not sure it's the biggest flame. We can't even begin to tackle racism with those 73 million Trump voters right now. Many of them simply aren't in a place to hear it. We've drawn the battle lines too deep and too wide. So what now? What do we do now with these folks who are angry or scared, who put up a new Trump sign for every Biden sign you put out? What do we do with those who were disinterested or disenfranchised in this election, who didn't vote at all? We can't just throw them away. They're our family, our neighbors, our coworkers, and our friends. So liberals, I tell you, this is not the time to gloat over our victory. This is not the time to be vindictive or antagonistic toward political opponents. This is not the time to perpetuate those attitudes of us versus them. This is the time to reach out to one another. As long as white folks are fighting each other, you're not in a position to do anti-racism or anti-oppression work. Truth be told, what you're doing is oppressing one another, othering one another by passing judgment and pasting labels on each other. Before we can make big systemic change, we, all of us, have to at least be able to talk to one another in a civil manner. It's time to extend an olive branch and start that healing process. It's time to stop using liberal and conservative as dirty words. It's time for dialogue and reaching out to those who are disenfranchised and those with whom we disagree, mending our friendships and our family relationships. Only then will we be able to come together to solve our big problems, to work together, to be flexible and innovative and find creative solutions to these ugly issues that have plagued us for years. It's time to focus on our mission, not on who has the power, not on any one individual, not asking what's in it for me. It's time to focus on who we want to be as Americans and as global citizens. It's time to build back better, to rebuild stronger, to rebuild more wisely, more inclusively. To paraphrase Sarah Eileen Lawal, it's time to remember our shared humanity, our universal kinship, our interdependence. It's time to unclench our fists and breathe together. It's time to recognize the spark of the divine inside all of us, even those we're not quite sure about. We can do this if we really want to. We just have to want to. We have to want to survive, want to live, want to build better. We've seen democracy in action. Can you imagine how much more we could accomplish if we infused our democracy with inclusion and love and compassion for all? If we work together for our common good? It's time for we the people to seek that thing which unites us. Somehow it seems appropriate to end my remarks today with comments from former President Barack Obama. He said, "It will be up to not Joe and Kamala, but each of us to do our part, to reach out beyond our comfort zone, to listen to each other, to lower the temperature, and to find some common ground from which to move forward." I couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
Our closing words are a second selection from the poem Amanda Gorman read at the Biden inauguration, "The Hill We Climb." So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When the day comes, we step out of the shade aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. The words to extinguish our chalice were written by UU Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern, titled "We Are One." Never has it been more true than now. We extinguished its flame, but the sparks within us remain alight. From each of us in our supposed solitude, the signals buzz and hum, sparkling through space, one to another, connecting us invisibly but palpably. We are one, and from every window, our light shines.
Many windows, one light, many waters, one sea. All lifted hearts are free.
The Oglala Lakota spiritual leaders, Black Elf, wrote, "All things are our relatives. What we do to everything, we do to ourselves."
As a Sikh, I believe I am a stranger to no one and no one is a stranger to me. Indeed, I am a friend of all.
It is written, it is taught, may it be so.